Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. So today we're going to do another theory video, and it's my theory as to who was the first Cortex Commando. Because we have a bunch of them in the first game and the second game, and then it's debatable whether Dingodile counts. Dingodile was foreshadowed in the flashback tapes, so they kind of retconned it into Dingodile was always planned from the start. And if you're unfamiliar with this, this is a screen cap from the canceled opening cutscene of the original Crash Bandicoot game. You have Ripperoo, Koala Kong, and Pinstripe. Those were the three Cortex Commandos that were in the first game. And then you have Tiny Tiger and the Komodo brothers, who were the Cortex Commandos in the second game. This kind of looks wonky. I had to take a screen cap of it while his head was visible, and then I had to paste it over when it was blocked by this. So these are all the Cortex Commandos that we have here, and Crash is a failed Cortex Commando. However, I think that I've discovered a different Cortex Commando that predates all of these characters. So without further ado, let's just jump into it, and I'm going to explain my theory to you guys. So this picture is the start of the theory. It's all of them in their child state. So I'm going to give a little explanation as to where this theory comes from and why I think what I think. So we have Engine here, right? And he has a paper airplane in his head. Usually Engine has a missile in his head, or a rocket if you want to call it that. And that was from one of his experiments. I believe that this picture shows what each character's passion is and what they will eventually go to do when they are adults. So at first I thought people were picking on Engine with this, but then the more I thought about it, Engine put the missile in his own head, so perhaps Engine made a paper airplane through it and it got stuck in his own head. Airplanes are, their main function is for transportation. And what does Engine go to do in the future of the series? Engine makes giant battle mechs that act as transports. So he has this mech here from Crash Bandicoot 2, and then he has the big spaceship mech, which eventually, after you blow up all of the machinery, this part just becomes another spaceship. So I personally believe that Engine's passion is creating mechs and transportation. So this airplane represents what Engine will do in the future. So then we move on to Cortex and Brio. We see the evil twins here, Victor and Moritz, and we know from the Crash Twinsanity that these two birds actually become mutated anthropomorphic animals. But these weren't the first ones created. Technically, their experiment was the first one chronologically, but it took them years of being in the 10th dimension for them to transform into these creatures. And I think that there is an experiment that predates both of these guys. So we already know that they used the Evolvo Ray to try and create their creatures. And if we go back to this image, we have Engines and we have Cortexes, but where is Brio's? My friends, I didn't want to spoil it too early into the video, so now I'm going to go to the other image that I think explains this very well. Right here, this is one of the unlockable art slides from Crash Twinsanity. Again, you have Engine with his airplane, and you have Cortex with his parrots, but then, if you look over here next to Brio, we have the Frogenstein. So I believe that this is Engine's because he has the bolts right there, similar to Engine's bolt, or Brio's bolts here. So, again, that's all of Engine, him and his airplane, Cortex, and the evil twins before they got mutated. And then we have Engine here with the frog. I don't know why I keep saying Engine. Brio there with the frog. So we already know that he was the one who perfected the Evolvo Ray. So it was one of his passions early on top of making mixtures with his chemicals, to make the Cortex commandos. Of course, they probably weren't called that back in the early stages of their experiments in their life. They were just probably mutants. But now, I think Brio's first successful experiment to create a mutant is the Frogenstein. And to give a little background on this character or enemy, if you haven't seen him or you haven't played Crash Twinsanity, he shows up in the Academy of Evil levels. He comes up out of the sewer drains in certain certain rooms in the Academy of Evil, and Cortex has to destroy them all with his gun to further progress into the level. So I think that this enemy here was the first of its kind, and somehow was able to replicate itself and make a whole bunch of them. So Brio and Cortex moved on, and this frog just kept replicating itself in the sewers of the Academy of Evil. And now this is where the theory gets a little extra. Brio also has another green bouncing experiment. So not only could this be the prototype Cortex Commando, but it could also be the prototype to his bouncing green blob monsters. So I don't know, it's pretty interesting that the frog could be the prototype to the Cortex Commandos, and it could also branch off and be the prototype to these blob-like creatures that he went to create later in the franchise. Well, it was in the first game, but I mean later in his life. And one last thing that I'd like to add, it doesn't really add much to the theory, but it is a nice coincidence that I wanted to add to this. So you guys know Brio has the giant hulking form when he drinks his mixtures in those vials. He becomes the hulking Brio. And forgive me if I've been saying engine. I don't know why engine keeps popping out of my mouth, but this is all about Brio. So Brio drinks the chemicals and he becomes the hulking monster. In Crash Twinsanity, he had a different form. That's right, it's a giant green frog-looking creature that jumps around. So I just thought that was a really, really cool, I guess, Easter egg addition to my theory. So just to recap, I think that this is Brio's first experiment, which went on to influence his future experiments. So you have the whole mutant aspect of it, and then when he makes the green blobs that also bounce, when he drinks the vials, he could also turn into a semi-frog-like creature that looks pretty much like the Frogenstein. So that's the theory. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. And as always, thank you for subscribing and commenting and thumbs up and thumbs down and all that good stuff. And we'll see you in the next one. Take care. Have a good night.